Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to all of our viewers, and welcome to Pure Malt TV, the Instant Innovation Series. This is our final episode in the Instant Innovation Series, but it is our first Brewmasters Roundtable, and we're extremely excited to welcome a very distinguished list of guests to our panel today. Each guest will share 5 minutes of their views and perspectives of some of the trends we see in the brewing industry before we open the floor for questions to our viewers. So let me start by introducing our panel. Mr. Esko Pajunen, a former president of the EBC and the Finnish Brewing Research Laboratory, joined Sinebrychoff in 1979. After holding positions as R&D manager and production director, Esko excelled to Group VP for R&D with the Carlsberg Group and head of research at the Carlsberg Research Center. Welcome, Esko, to the panel.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Our next panelist, Mr. Kurt Marshall, is currently the head brewmaster at the preeminent VLB in Berlin. Kurt has been in this role since 2009 and has over a decade of experience working with the VLB member companies on product and process development projects. Prior to his time at the VLB, Kurt worked with various British and German breweries, gaining exposure to the production of many different beer styles. Originally from Alabama, USA, Kurt moved to Germany in the early 90s. Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you, Ross. Glad to be here.
Colin Wilson. Colin is the managing director of Totally Natural Solutions Limited, producers of high quality natural hop aroma and flavor extracts for late and dry hopping. Colin earned his degree in chemistry from Edinburgh University, and after a spell in pharmaceuticals was appointed operations director at Bath Haas UK. Since 2013, Colin has led Totally Natural Solutions as the managing director and one of the founding members, and now distributes their products globally to craft and industrial brewers. Welcome, Colin.
Hi, Ross. Thanks very much for that intro. Pleasure to be here and look forward to the session.
And last but certainly not least, Mr. Roddy McEwen. Roddy is currently the head of technical innovation at C&C Group, based at the famous Tennant Caledonian Wellpark Brewery in Glasgow. Roddy has over 18 years of experience in the brewing industry, working with most of the major global brewers. Spells with Molson Coors, Sabmiller, Carlsberg, and Scottish and Newcastle well positioned Roddy to offer an interesting and varied perspective. Outside of the brewery world, Roddy is also currently the vice chair of the Industrial Advisory Board at the ICBD at Heriot-Watt University. Welcome, Roddy.
Thanks very much, Ross. Good to be here.
So let us start by listening to each of our panelists on the themes and trends that they see within the brewing world. Esko, if I may, I'll come to you first.
It's okay.
2020 and the global pandemic, we find ourselves certainly changed consumer awareness and behaviors. What trends are you seeing arising in the industry this year?
There are quite many new trends, and what I have been looking is that some of the big brewers, they are also looking some of the expansions beyond the traditional brewing field. So they are going to ciders, they are looking at the hard seltzers, they are looking some of the wellness issues connected to some of the drink products as well. So what I'm sharing you today, so that is going to that beyond brewing area, so not the traditional beer innovation. So I like to go to see what are the options of traditional brewers to go beyond the brewing area to do some of the production opportunities to go a little bit further. So my areas is just to discuss about the production of hard seltzer base in using your brewery and brewing equipment. We faced that problem in 1995 in Finland, because we had similar products, but they used to be gin-based with grapefruit flavoring, and that was sold only in the alcohol monopoly shops. In 1995, those products became available in normal retail shops, but provided that they are produced by fermented alcohol. And there we found that there are two options available. Just use the normal sugar base, your sugar fermentations, let the yeast ferment sugar to alcohol and use that in that kind of what we call long drinks, which today they are called hard seltzer more or less. Another option is, of course, a malt base, to use the wort and let that ferment into the same direction. Using sugar, that's much more straightforward. Just use sugar and let it ferment. But the challenge there, that is the fermentation byproducts and how to get rid of those. And I will come back to that a little bit later on. So using malt, that gives you more options available. So you can decide your fullness of beer by your mashing program, whether that is more full-bodied or whether that is straight light alcohol base. And if you are using some of the amyloglucosidase enzymes there, so you can convert all your carbohydrates in malt into the fermentable sugars. And in that sense, so if you are just aiming at pure alcohol bases, I would like to question whether wort boiling is not necessary at all. And of course, if you are using alcohol base, so no hopping, that is not needed either. So the basic question, and one of the flavor issue, if you're using malt base there, so that is, of course, the malt overt flavor compounds coming from wort. What we came up in fermentation, which is quite challenging there, is that we decided to use the fermentation using quite high yeast pitching rates, 5 to 6 times the normal pitching rates, meaning that we are using from 75 to 100 million cells per mil, and no aeration of wort, whether that was sugar base or malt base. And in that sense, so if you have no aeration, high pitching rate, there is no yeast growth, practically no yeast growth. And when there is no yeast growth, so also all the fermentation flavor compounds, they will be at much lower level than in normal beer fermentation. And that high yeast growth, you can also have high gravity fermentation there, and the fermentation is end fermented in 2 to 3 days time. And so one of the critical points is then just to take the yeast out of the fermentation liquid as quick as possible, just to avoid any yeast autolysis there and the off flavors based on autolysis products. And that could be used. And if there still are too high flavor profile around, so you can also use your active carbon treatment just to reduce the flavors, just to reduce the flavors still around there. And there you have alcohol, clear, pure alcohol base to be used as hard seltzers. So that's the first one. And then comes the second, which is cereal based for wellness drinks. Malt, as you all know, has quite a good healthy profile. It's have a healthy image. It has good mineral composition, high in potassium and magnesium. it has some fibers, proteins, and it has also carbohydrates, which are slow carbohydrates. It's dextrins there. The process there, it's very similar to alcohol-free process, production process. You can use more or less the same. But if you and no hopping, and either there, I just question the need of wort boiling, what is not needed for. And if that malt base, if there is still the big challenge there, that is a wort carbonyl compounds, which are might interfere into your final product later on. So 2 ways of reducing the carbonyl compounds. It's cold contact with yeast, short cold fermentation with yeast, reducing carbonyl compounds, or you can use yeast strains which are not fermenting maltose at all. So the monosaccharide content in wort, normally that's about 10% of the all fermentable carbohydrates there. So the alcohol content will be quite close to the limit of no alcohol products, 0.5, 0.8 ABV. So that is one of the ways you can expand your product portfolio's options there to go into the hard seltzers, to go to the wellness drinks or sports drinks, wherever you like, and just use your normal brewing equipment. If you have innovations, you also need some ways to produce your innovations. That is more or less what I like to contribute today.
Esko, thank you so much. Some really interesting content that you've shared with us there today. Certainly, I think we all see the trends and movements towards hard seltzer, very much inspired by the popularity of that category in the US. But certainly we see a lot of movement and brand creation happening in Europe and the UK. So if I will, I'll pose a question to you now, Kurt, to invite you to share with us your views. Kurt, in your role with the VLB, you have the benefit of working on R&D projects for a wide variety of different beverage companies. Where have you seen focus move towards of late?
Well, I didn't really know what anyone else was going to talk about, and Esko touched on some of the same trends. In a sense, you never want to talk over someone else, but it's nice to see the same things that are confirmed. We're also seeing a trend to hard seltzer. Hard seltzer is like Freddy Krueger. You think it's dead, and it's not dead, and it comes back again. And I think one of the primary reasons for this is a taxation issue. In many countries, a lot of the taxing bodies are really not sure what to do with it. It's not malt based generally. The ones we're primarily dealing with are sugar based. So it's not really a loophole, but it's a tax area which is very attractive for a lot of companies that are producing a product. And I think in the past, hard seltzer, at least in the United States, which was probably its largest market, had an image problem. We've got a new generation. We've got different marketing. We've got different production methods to a certain extent. And it's become very attractive again. The negative image is not really there. I think what we're concentrating on primarily in this is the production processes, and Esko touched on this. I don't want to go too deep into it because he talks so well on it. But primarily, we're just concentrated on time, producing a clean base product to which they're adding then aromas to very high attenuation and something that again produces a clean base that they can work with.
And Kurt, have you seen many of these products? Sorry, I shouldn't really be asking questions at this stage, but I'm going to because I'm keen to know the answer. Have you seen many of these products finding a use for hops?
The ones that we've been working on, no. I know there is interest in it. I think there's interest in hop oils, and I suspect Colin may be able to add something about that, hop aromas to this type of thing. We haven't been directly involved in anything that's been adding hops, but I think the aroma aspects are interesting. So I would not be surprised if we were involved in something with that in the future.
And in terms of other trends and projects that you maybe have seen at the VLB, am I right in thinking you've been doing some work on hop creep?
Yeah, I just had three basic trends. I think ESCO really, the primary one that really we're dealing with the most right now is hard seltzer. Other two trends, alcohol-free beers. ESCO's touched on that just a bit. And also there's some research going on with biotransformation and hop creep. These are just, we're really in an infancy of analysis, cold hop beers or these dry hop beers they're old, but they're new. And when we get into the actual analysis of it and what's happening in there, it's very new. And there's some research going on now about hop creep, which, just to touch, is basically they're finding an increase in attenuation after packaging. There's a few suppositions of why this is happening. Enzymatic is one, and then biotransformation is also that we're finding changes in the aroma profile. Everybody knows that, hoppy beers and dry hop beers, the aroma changes over time. The answer is why. And the research going on, and some of the things that we're looking at are the biotransformation, primarily in the interaction with the yeast, with the hop products. So we've got some ongoing projects. There's research going on with the biotransformation that I'm not directly involved in, but we also have some projects with hop creep that I'm directly involved in, and we're looking at some solutions that hopefully are fairly simple and straightforward that solve this problem.
Excellent. Thanks, Kurt. Appreciate that. Roddy, if we can move over to you maybe next. Roddy, you have an experience working with a number of the world's largest brewers during your career. What's different now in 2020, and where do you see the industry going from your perspective?
Okay, so I've got three kind of big themes that I'm going to just very kind of quickly list out, and then I'll go into like the big one that I see now, and I hope that most people would agree with me as well. The first three are, we've touched on it a little bit already, this kind of, the consumer is always wanting something new, and every time they go into a bar, they're wanting something different and something new, something to excite them. More and more and more. So there's this requirement for variety and novelty more than ever. And, we were talking about seltzers as an example of that. That's something that's here and it's not going anywhere fast. The second one I've got here is the idea that consumers are actually really interested in where their products are coming from, where the ingredients are coming from that are being used. And the processes and techniques that are going into making the product. So this whole idea of provenance and authenticity is another major theme. And then the third one is this whole idea also that consumers are wanting all the fun, they want all the enjoyment and all the satisfaction that our products give them without any of the detrimental health effects. And so there's a huge growth of products in that area, of zero beer being one of them. So those are kind of three consumer trends that are very much there. But the big one for me is sustainability, or rather unsustainability in everything that we're doing. And I think that all areas of business are affected, and all business has to react to it. And a lot of businesses are reacting to it, thankfully. Consumers are expecting good sustainability credentials. Customers are now choosing suppliers based on sustainability. Government and wider society are becoming more and more demanding for good sustainability credentials, which ultimately leads to impacting on our license to trade. Shareholders are now making investment decisions based on sustainability credentials, and employees are now only wanting to work for companies who hold sustainability at their very heart and very core. So that, for me, that's by far the biggest trend at the moment. There's some good, one area of sustainability that I'm really interested in is what we do with our waste products or co-products that we haven't quite figured out how to get the most value from. I think that's a fascinating part. And I've done a bit of this in the past with other companies and where I am at the moment as well. You know, spent grain, yeast, trub, volatile compounds, wastewater. I think there's a lot more that we can do to get more value out of those. I think wastewater, for example, there's somebody growing algae on wastewater to generate biomass, which is then going into to produce bioethanol. Spent grain is being used now for, you can hydrolyze spent grain to produce various compounds such as acetone, butanol, and ethanol. You can use pyrolysis to produce biochar, which is high value, and bio oil, which is also very high value. Somebody is using E. coli to digest spent grain to make hydrogen. And the last one I've got here is that there are people out there now who are separating spent grain into a higher protein fraction and using that protein fraction to supplement snacks and other food items for the human food chain. So that's where I think is the big focus and should be going forwards as well.
Excellent, Roddy. Thank you so much. Yeah, I totally agree that if businesses won't take ownership of sustainability and progression in this space, then we don't have much hope at dealing with the problem long term. Before I pose my question to Colin and we hear from Colin his insights on trends, can I please invite all of our viewers to start considering questions for the Q&A forum. There is two ways that you can ask questions in today's roundtable. The first one is to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Simon, give us a wave, Si, is kindly moderating the Q&A, and we'll make sure that your question gets posed to the panel. The second way that you can ask a question today is when we go into the question section, please use the raise your hand function. This will allow us to bring you into the discussion and you can ask the question to the panelist in person. We'd love a mixture of both formats, so please, I would request of all the viewers to come up with some good questions for the panel. Okay. Colin, as our domain expert on all things hops, how do you see brewers using this crucial ingredient of beer in more novel ways today?
Yeah, thanks, Ross. I mean, I think the beauty of coming last is that most of the other participants have helped me shape exactly where I'm going to go with this. And for me, the most important aspect of the hop industry in the last 10 years or so has just been the sheer amount of innovation that's taken place. And that's across the whole spectrum. That's beer styles, so brewers brewing ever more creative, as Roddy mentioned. Everyone wants something new. Hop growers growing new varieties with notes and flavors and aromas that 10 years ago wouldn't have even been considered successful. So some of the tropical flavor notes, they just weren't the thing that was desired. So we've seen a lot of innovation across all of that. But I think obviously we set up a business and where that business has really made some impact has been because all innovation at the end of the day has to be scalable. It has to be reproducible. And ultimately there's a balance between the amount of hops, the hop impact that we can get, with the cost of manufacture, and that touches on Roddy's sustainability element. So whilst we've had all this innovation, it's really, really important that we also look at things like how much of that innovation is covered by IP. So there's challenges to brewers such as proprietary varieties, and we touch on things like supply and demand issues. So it's not just as simple as saying, oh, there's a really nice hop, I want to use that. I have to consider all those challenges as well. Now, what that really means for us, for example, there is a huge role for extracts because we can deliver more sustainable solutions. We can deliver high impact, but we have to do that in a way that is natural. And really that's the theme that I want to talk about in the next couple of minutes, is we have to park the preconceptions of extracts that maybe existed in the past, you know, solvent extracted products, maybe they were chemically modified, whatever else. And really, we've got to focus on this new generation 2. I mean, I'm not a marketeer by any scope, but Roddy touched on the need for a provenance, the need for a story. We need to carry that into extracts. And extracts need to be natural. They need to be clean label. They certainly, in my opinion, need to be 100% hop. Absolutely true to type. So this is where we see this varietal importance, and ultimately sustainable. So when we think about that, really what I think has changed in the last few years is that there is a desire for really collaborative innovation. And that's where the brewer comes together with an organization like TNS, who's got some technical expertise, but also we link that into the universities. So some of the skill sets that we have there, we're able to link all these pieces and develop new products that truly are value added for everybody in the chain. So just a little bit of awareness of that. We now have natural bittering. So we have bittering products have existed for a long period. They were traditionally made with inorganic metal catalysts, or there was a hydrogenation or whatever went on. And those were aimed at driving yield and improvements in efficiency in the process, both of which they do incredibly well, but they're not clean label. So really where we're able to think about now is, as I say, we can drive those reactions using technology, using our analyticals, and say, let's make a natural alpha-based bittering product, and let's make a natural beta-based that is light stable. So we're able to offer those things as a complete solution. And they are actually have added benefits as well as the clean label aspect. They have a completely different bitterness quality. So this drinkability, they're less astringent, they're softer in their bitterness. And they're, as I say, they comply with the EU regulations as natural, the 1334 regulations, which is really interesting because as we talked about in some of those other presentations, it's not just beer that we make in a brewery anymore. It's often low alcohol beer, it's seltzers, all these things. So Kurt touched on the use of hop oils in other beverage. Absolutely. But for that to happen and not impact labeling, it's really good if they're natural. And that's what we can certainly do with not only the bittering, but also the hop aromas. I mean, this innovation has generated now, there are something like 300 varieties of hops commercially grown, and they provide us with a huge spectrum of aromas and flavors, which we can increase through technology. And we have a patented fractionation technology that effectively gives us lots of building blocks. But that's done in a natural way. It's done using CO2 to fractionate. There's no solvents in there. So again, you're protecting all of those subtleties so that you can effectively create a spectrum of building blocks for the brewer to have a huge amount of choice in natural creation of flavors and aromas for dry hop replacement. Touches on Roddy's point about sustainability. We minimize our beer losses. We use the extracts far more cleverly to impact that. But we can also change the kettle hop combinations so that ultimately we can have late stage differentiation. So we can have all the scalability of a single wort stream, and then we differentiate at the end. And we don't need to do that by boosting or chemically modifying, and we can do it all 100% from hop because of these exciting raw materials that now exist. So what I would say is there's a wide range, and the hop really is a plant that keeps on giving. And we're only just beginning to learn some of the things that we can actually do with this plant. We know that it has microbial stability. We know that we can have foam positive and negative fractions. We know that we can create natural haze now. So there are products there that we can put in from hop that can go into our NEPA beer styles or other beverages such as ciders to make them cloudy. And then we touched basically on this demand now for low alcohol. That's another huge trend, but it has to be done in a natural way. So we can make soluble extracts that are 100% hop. Roddy's point about the provenance of where it can go. We can claim those labels around where the hops were grown because we're actually extracting that named hop variety and preserving all those unique characters. So I think it's a really, really interesting time for hop oils, for hop products, for the hop industry. And I mean, just recently on a very personal note, we've been able to do some work with the New Zealand Hop Cooperative, bringing those varieties that otherwise didn't exist as products into our technical base. So this is this collaborative innovation that I was talking about. Suddenly varieties like Nelson Sauvin, like Ruaka and Kohatu will be available as extracts. Well, from a brewer's perspective, that's a whole new set of pipes to play a tune on. So it's a really innovative time. I think if that's all done in a way where, again, as I say, these are natural products, we can access new markets, we can access new segments of those markets, new geographies. We haven't touched on things, but I guess it strolls into the sustainability part where, you know, it's very easy to ship a hop extract to Africa. It's less easy to ship a bale of hops to Africa. So there's a sustainability aspect to all of those things there. So I would finish by just sort of saying there's a huge innovative pipeline, not just from TNS, but from all of the hop guys. I think it's a really exciting time for the hop industry as the next decade builds that, that collaborative idea between far more open relationships with brewers where we're providing value-added extracts, this natural, really adding value. These are not commodities, but also this interaction with the grower base and with the academic institutions, the universities who can really help and provide highly qualified people to drive forward the science. So yeah, I think that would be my summary. It's a very exciting time for natural hop extracts to play an important role in sustainable, exciting new beer styles.
Thanks for that, Colin. And certainly, as the consumer becomes more aware of what we eat and drink, just places more pressure on manufacturers and the industry to find these more innovative raw materials, right? So really interesting to hear how the hop industry is adapting to that as well. Okay, guys, I want to thank all of our panelists for their 5-minute sections and sharing with us the trends that they've highlighted. What we will do now is we will head into our questions and answers section. And my glamorous assistant Simon, if you could come live and let us know what questions we've got to work with.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. So we've got some great questions coming in from the attendees here. Some really interesting topics. I'm going to start off with the big one that we've been discussing today, which is sustainability. This question came in from Dinendre Disanyaki. The question is, hi, how can manufacturers address sustainability with regard to secondary packaging better? Recyclable packaging or more return packaging? And it's not directed at any of one of the panelists, but perhaps one for Roddy or perhaps for Esko. So it's about secondary packaging, recyclable materials, or more returnable packaging. Anyone want to take that one?
I can quickly kind of touch on it. I think it's that's a massive question. And it's not something that can be answered by me or any individual. I think Obviously, plastic is out because it's got such a negative press. So goodbye plastic. People have moved into card, which is recyclable, which is great. However, card is also carrying with it quite a high carbon footprint because you use more of it and it's heavier to transport around the world. So that's not great. So what's next? You know, Carlsberg and their glue spots. I think that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. But then also maybe we need to change the way we buy beer. Maybe we need to think completely differently and that's working as a society together to say, okay, maybe we don't need to cluster our cans and our bottles together. Maybe have a system where it's sold in single units, maybe bigger single units that are returnable. You know, I think we have to think a little bit more outside the box.
Full circle to the growler, back to the
absolutely,
container.
Great stuff. Well, thanks, Roddy. Good insight. And like you say, big question. I think you answered that very concisely. And like you say, there's lots to go out with that one. This next question is coming in from Daniel Carey, I believe a friend of ours in the US. This is probably best directed at Colin. The question is concerning CO2 hop extract. Most brewers prefer those extracted from high alpha hops for economic reasons. From a flavor point of view, is there any benefit to utilizing extracts made from low alpha noble types? Is that something you may want to have a go at, Colin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. So the alphas, CO2 extracts, obviously, if you're adding them to the kettle, you're getting the isomerizations for bitterness. That's the best way to use them. But the beauty of CO2 extract is actually some of the other components that by adding them into the wort kettle and allowing them to be part of that process, you get so many other mouthfeel, maybe the protein breaks, all these other things there. There's microbial stability. So there's no sense necessarily in paying for a huge amount of hop oil to be in your kettle, because ultimately it'll be boiled out. But it does add some late hop flavors. So I would suggest you use alpha hops for your bittering and you combine that with late stage hop oils. So CO2 extract from hop oil, I wouldn't certainly, it's down to the individual, but it's not something I would necessarily recommend. I think you can use the alpha and have the oil components in there for kettle hop flavor.
Great, thanks, Colin. Again, very eloquently answered. Thank you for that. Another question here from our very own Ron Dzansky. This one is, I believe, for Esko. Question is, are the use of specialty ethanol tolerant yeasts recommended for hard seltzer base? When using sugar, are extra nutrients required?
I don't think that yeast nutrients, they are just used for yeast growth. And when we have so high pitching rates, so yeast is not growing and no aeration there, so yeast is not growing there. So what yeast is doing is just fermenting. And in that sense, so no nutrients are needed there. Another question, they're using exactly the normal production strain there, so I don't see any need for alcohol tolerant strain in this respect. And when using the surplus yeast from breweries, so that yeast will never be used again. So that will be discarded then after the alcohol fermentation. So in that sense, either there are no sense to use special alcohol tolerant yeast. We tried close to 20 degree Plato, and that was running quite smoothly in a very short time. And from the sustainability point of view, I also question the need for wort boiling, because that is one of the major energy consumer in wort production phase.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Esko. Great answer. And conscious of the time, but hopefully we can just squeeze in one or two, some fantastic questions coming in. This one directed at Kurt. Exogenous enzymes have been used in wine production for several years for the biotransformation to release aroma from grape skins. Would there be any appetite for brewers to use similar enzymes to form more flavor active compounds from hops? Big question. Kurt, do you fancy go at that?
Sure. We haven't been confronted with this. At least I haven't yet. I think brewers worldwide are open to a lot of options. I think it's a good idea. What we're really looking at as far as the biotransformation is more or less at this stage the actual effect that the hops are having primarily with the yeast. And if we're talking about adding exogenous enzymes to get aroma compounds, we know this works, but what we're not doing is really concentrating on the interaction with the yeast. I think we're talking parallel to one another. We know we're able to get these aromas with these enzymes and get them out. What we're concentrating on now is trying to figure out why some of this stuff happens with the actual interaction with the yeast. And if we're going to add enzymes like this, the time that these enzymes, when they would have to be added, to the process, because they're not only going to interact with the hop compounds, they're going to interact with other compounds as well. But as far as the and again, Colin may actually be able to jump in here and help with this question. But as far as our concentration at this stage, what we're talking about biotransformation is the actual interaction of the hop compounds with the yeast.
Yeah, if that's okay for me just to pitch in, absolutely, Kurt, I couldn't agree more. I think this is really one of the exciting areas in hop understanding is you're finding that there are components that are metabolized or generated from that interaction. So it's the yeast strain is important, the hop variety is important, and then we see different thiols or different components generated through that interaction. So I think enzymes have a role to release and maybe make more available for the yeast some of those hop components. So, you know, we haven't talked about things like glycosides, but some of those things that are bound can be released by that. But really it is about this interaction of the hop oils and the yeast and what it creates in that interaction.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. I think with where we are on timing, we will maybe wrap it up there. Some really good questions from our viewers, though, so thank you for that. And really always nice to see in this type of forum multiple people answering the questions and kind of fusing their answers together. Really, really great to see that in a roundtable format. So I think it leaves me to wrap up today's session. A massive thank you to our panelists who have been absolutely stellar and really, really interesting in what they've shared with us today. I hope that our viewership has similarly taken some inspiration and some insight into what the guys have had to say. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in and listening to us for half an hour or so on a Thursday afternoon. I know everybody has busy schedules at the moment. So as with all of our webinars, we appreciate your time commitment to joining us and participating and listening to the content. And yeah, it's very sad that I have to say it's our last Instant Innovation Series episode, but we are hoping to bring you some new content over the next couple of months under the Pure Malt TV umbrella. So please stay tuned and join us for some future content in the coming months. So from myself and the Pure Malt team, thank you very much. And on behalf of the panelists, thank you again, guys. And we will bid you adieu at that.